Hi, and welcome to our program. So thank you for coming in and having a chat with me. I really appreciate it. As part of what I call the keithCHATS series, so I'll post-produce some intros and stuff later, but we might as well get right down to it. And gee, I've been doing a lot of looking at your stuff, and boy, you're a super active guy, I gotta say.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, lots of things on the go. And I'm not going to talk about your book specifically, but I think that's one of the most recent thing that you did, because I want to talk more about everything behind the book. But I love the description. This is from Amazon. Did you actually write this, or was it, marketing expert? But the same big
Probably that's Sean's handiwork. So yeah,
Sean, yes, co-author Sean Coyne.
yep,
And yeah, you're talking here. It's a great piece to incite people to read for sure. You know, what's it about, or what is it about artificial intelligence driving tech giants? So true, like Musk and so on. Why are they racing to develop and own these thinking machines while unsure of the harm they could cause us? Can we trust nation states and NGOs to use their totalitarian strategies when they don't truly understand the problems we face? This is music to my ears. These self-appointed masters of artificial intelligence are gambling with our future while plunging headfirst into a high-stakes race and potentially catastrophic consequences. How should we confront them? Your book, Mentoring the Machine's Orientations, there's two parts, I guess, to the book one, book two, cuts through the noise to provide clear, common sense answers with a practical narrative that builds on straightforward ideas. This book offers a cogent understanding of the AI phenomenon and urges us to resist surrendering our influence over artificial intelligence to the whims of the marketplace or the state, and instead to engage in a meaningful way to ensure our survival. I call that agency, that we need our agency,
yep,
and we can't
yep.
forget that we have agency, and if we don't take it, well, we're going to lose out. So would you say that's your basic philosophy as to why you're doing what you're doing? It's to give us the impetus
Yeah,
to
I mean that's why I'm doing what I'm doing with respect to the AI project. Yeah, is I think um, I mean there's two issues here. There's the deeper issue, which is foregrounded there, which is like what are we doing? And connected with that is why are we doing it? And then the second issue, if we do have good answers to those, we face the problem, which is called the alignment problem. But my point, which I think hope comes across in the blurb that Sean wrote, is until we get a good answer to the first two, and until we know what we're really talking about, our attempts to solve the alignment problem are, I would say, almost completely misguided. I think all the current proposals for how to go about addressing it, I think, um, I'll be bold. I think they're doomed to fail, and you don't want to fail when you're confronting this problem. It's not a problem for which we can afford to fail. So there's an urgency to this, and Keith, the trick here is to how to sound urgent without sounding like an apocalyptic kook or something like that. How to show up as I believe I should. I'm a cognitive scientist. I should show up as a bona fide scientist and academic. This is one of my areas of expertise. I'm not a programming person, but I reflect on the nature of cognition, the nature of artificial intelligence, the nature of these kinds of projects. So yeah, given all of what I just said, that blurb captures it, I think, very well.
When did you actually become inspired to move in this direction, or bring this into your portfolio, if you will. How far back does this go with you?
I've been talking about the nature of intelligence and its relationship to artificial intelligence as long as I've been teaching the introduction to cognitive science at the University of Toronto, which I've been teaching there since 1994. It's been a long time, and of course we've gone through a lot. But I'm publishing on this right now. Just got a published paper published. I was co-author with a whole bunch of other people. The first author is Johannes Jaeger on naturalizing relevance realization, why it's fundamentally not computational. That's actually a paper on what do we really deeply mean by intelligence? What do we mean by artificial intelligence? Can it be captured algorithmically, computationally? So from 94 till now, but I started way back way back in 94, when, actually maybe even a little bit before when I was working on my PhD, because it was on trying to get the intersection between psychology, philosophy, and AI and artificial intelligence about the nature of intelligence and cognition. This particular project about, how it's come to the fore with the rise of the large language models, the LLMs like ChatGPT, that came about after up until sort of ChatGPT 3. I was very unimpressed, so I wasn't concerned. ChatGPT 4, well, I have very deep criticisms of it. I do not think it is artificially intelligent in a scientifically important way, but we can come back to that. But when I saw, nevertheless, the kind of power that it presented, I did a video. I dropped everything and went like a hermit for 3 weeks, and then it came out. I produced a video essay, and then the person who is publishing my book, Sean Coyne, my book on the awakening from the meaning crisis, said, "Let's turn your video essay into a popular book like right away." And so that's how it came about.
I find it interesting too that it goes back that far. I can recall being early days of the internet. I was working with the Scarborough Health Department, and I was one of the folks. They said, "Well, why don't you explore this kind of thing?" So that got me captivated. Um, but yeah, I think some of the deep thinkers, deep divers, such as yourself, have been on this for quite some time and seeing how it's peaking, if you will. You mentioned
Yeah.
ChatGPT. I've found with the audiences I speak to that it was a real uptick. Audiences picked up, etc., over this. And prior to that, people had somewhat a Terminator-like vision of this thing, the robots and so on, and that's dissipated somewhat. So maybe the knowledge is improving, which is a good thing. Have you found that with the audiences that you're seeing and feedback on your books and so on, lectures, are we as a society getting there, better positioned to rational and sort of deal with this? Do you think?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, um, so I'm working with some people I can't disclose because they're bound by sort of NDAs. They're on the inside. I'll just say it that way. About how these machines represent especially tricky problem. I'm going to use a technical term or ontological, like having to do with the structure of being, because they're new kinds of beings. Um, and so human beings don't come readily prepared with sort of an established set of cultural categories for processing them well. And so I guess what I want to say, Keith, is I've seen bimodal. On one hand, there are people who are investing in being educated about this, and that's leading to an uptick in like, what do we really mean by intelligence, by consciousness? Are these machines really that? And I get to participate in some of those more public discussions. I've been very grateful for that. But there's another whole thing where and this is very concerning. There was more and more people. These machines are excellent at convincing people that they're intelligent or that they possess consciousness in a really kind of BS fashion. And that has also increased. And sorry, this is kind of funny for me because I get into two minds about this, because as a scientist, I'm happy when I make a prediction that comes true, but the prediction was a noxious prediction, which is I predicted what was going to happen is like people were going to very rapidly take up psychologically inappropriate, even spiritual or religious relationships to these AI. And that's been happening. And I get people emailing me all the time talking about either that, oh, their LLM is, in fact, a conscious being with who's superior or enlightened, and other people about they've lost a friend to like a cult that's built up around an LLM, and it's going both ways to my mind. It's sort of bifurcating. There's more and more people I think are getting swept up in really irrational response. But I think your point is also right, that there is a group of people. This has provoked a lot of people to a kind of project of education to try and get clearer about what all of this is and what's going on.
This is why I feel actually AI literacy. I'm not too fond of the word literacy, but it kind of deals with what we're talking about. Is so important, certainly in schools, but beyond schools. And some of the quotes I've pulled from some of your videos, AI and human stupidity. Well, that's my phone, believe it or not. Let me just set the. I don't usually have that happen. Um, yes, AI and human stupidity, and things like we have to really commit to this, the reality of what's going on, and this one here about inherent human susceptibility of self-deception. I really
Yep.
enjoyed. But what is it about us humans that, like, I find it's like we treat these kind of like our pets. We might even give names to them. And we do have this sense to put humanity values
Yep.
into what is technology and in fact is just bits and bytes. It's not real in that sense. What is it about us that makes us want to do that? Why do we do that?
Well, it's a very powerful adaptive strategy. I mean, for a while it was floated as a now probably defunct theory for the origin of religion, in fact, this sort of idea of a hyper agency detector module it's to our advantage and not in the sense of being accurate. So we can make lots of mistakes if we can catch the one or two instances where there really is prey or predator there, or another human being that we can work with, or could be an enemy. So if we make a lot of mistakes when we say, "Oh, there's a face in the clouds," well, so what? Because the one time we catch the tiger or the deer or the enemy saves our life. And so the idea is, we've got an adaptive proclivity to animate things. And you see this, of course, with children, and with toys and with dolls. And this is good. Like I said, it gives us a lot of practice for the very, very difficult task of what you and I are trying to do right now. We literally just met and we're trying to figure out what's going on in each other's minds. And I can't see your mind. You can't see my mind. This is actually, this is, yeah, it is a very, very difficult problem. And then, and very often we can short circuit wasted time if we take what Daniel Dennett called the attentional stance towards human artifacts. Because a human being built it, we can kind of treat it as if if it's got thoughts. We'll say things like, why is your computer trying to do that right now? Well, I mean, if you think about it, you mean why did the people do that, make it to do, but you short circuit it that way so you can bring all this machinery quickly to bear. So there's lots of ways in which doing this is incredibly adaptive. But here's one of my common refrains: the very processes that make us so adaptive are simultaneously the processes that make us so prey to self-deception.
Yeah, indeed. Now, would you think this is part of the urge we have to apply skin-like to robots, for example? Like we want them to
Yeah.
look like human beings, whereas
Yeah.
I would be at more of the mind of no, let's not do that because we don't want to forget. I mean, we really need to, I think, understand what's happening, and we're not dealing with a human; we're dealing with something else.
I think that's right. I mean, of course, it's tricky because we have the uncanny valley phenomena. Initially, people like it when you make the robot look more human, and then you get to this place where they don't like it because it falls between the category of that where they can't tell, and that really disturbs them. And so it's a it's an issue about we want to feel at home with our technology. We want to be able to use our very developed skills of mind sight, seeing other minds, picking up agents, using the intentional strategy. But on the other hand, like you say, if we go too far, we can blind ourselves to relevant information that could prevent us from falling into some very horrible self-deceptive traps. Yes.
And you've talked about birthing an infant giant, for
Yeah.
example, and children. We need to treat them as children versus tools. But how far do we go with that? Like, do we ultimately need to remember that they are tools? Bottom line.
Well, I want to be very careful about the context of that argument. And so one of the things I was very clear about, well, and Sean and I are clear about the book, is I didn't make predictions about where the AI was going. The one prediction I made was a meta prediction, was all the predictions we were seeing when ChatGPT 4 was released would all be falsified. And I'm happy to say that has come true. And so that means I didn't talk about predictions. I talk about thresholds that we want to go in through. Let me give you one. This will give me a minute, please, because this is important. We could continue to make these machines. They're basically sort of parodies, or they're pantomimes of our intelligence. We can get into the guts of that later. We can continue to make them more like that, more powerful. But we have good reason to believe that making a system more intelligent doesn't make it more rational, where rational means what I said a few minutes ago, being able to pick up on how your strategies also make you prone to self-deception. So we can make, if we just continue the way we're going, we can make very, and I'm doing scare quotes for those of who are just listening, very intelligent machines that are not in any way rational. And of course, this is already showing up in the confabulation, the hallucination, the confident lying, all the crappy things they do that people are now coming clear on. Now, here's what I mean with a threshold. We can choose. We have a choice point. We can choose. That's pretty bad. We don't want them to be like that. Let's try and make them more rational. That's a threshold. And when we cross that, the strategies we're using for making them merely intelligent, again, scare quotes, are going to be radically insufficient for making them rational. And we have to stop, we have to start moving towards strategies that are much more like, well, how do you make your kids rational? You have to get them to care about what's true and good and beautiful. You have to get them to take on responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a different project. So that's what I meant. I don't think we can mentor the current LLMs. I'm saying if we I didn't mean, we're not trying to be deceptive. This was an opportunity to get people to wake up that, yeah, maybe not right now, but we're on the threshold of confronting the possibility of real AI. And let's now think about it now. We've been provoked into a really good moment of reflection. Let's take advantage of that and say, do we want to cross that threshold? And if we do, we have to change our thinking, because Keith, we could rely on us as natural models of what we mean by intelligent. But rationality is not natural to us. It has to be cultivated and educated and developed. And so we need much better models and much better templates and very different styles of training and instruction if we want to make these machines rational. We don't have to, but then we have to accept the fact that we're going to make these wickedly powerful machines that are wickedly irrational. And do we want that in our lives? We face a choice. That's what I mean by a threshold.
That's really interesting on so many different levels. I can think of many developers who consider they are birthing their children. This is my baby. It can be
Yeah.
successful beyond anybody's thoughts. And they're so into that, they haven't managed to pull back and ask those kind of questions, really. That
Yeah.
worries me. And then there are others, and I think OpenAI is an example of this, where the initial beginnings of that company were very, it seemed to me, fair, that we weren't going to do harm per se. And now I think that's kind of moved off a little bit. People have left, and that kind of thinking is more now into, no, let's go for our product. Let's go for it. And
Mhm.
in spite of some of the concerns that have been emerging, they're all in. And yeah, there's a lot of pushback, but I don't think they're resisting the pushback. That worries me too. And again, I wonder about our human psyche, that that have they just, gotten taken? It's like the drug. They're into the drug so far now. They can't pull back and say, wait a minute, perhaps we should pause. Let's take a look at what we've got. Let's look at what's happening. Where do we want to go? The kind of questions that you're suggesting. What's your take on that? Are we in trouble with many of these?
Yeah, the people that made the machines are not the people who should be deciding if we should make the machines, or how they should be disposed. They fall prey to a very pernicious error, which is believing that because you're very smart, you're very rational, and because you're very rational, you're very wise. There's, as I've indicated, overwhelming, I mean robustly, empirically confirmed evidence that intelligence is perhaps necessary, but nowhere near sufficient for being rational. And then the same kind of arguments for being rational as necessary, but insufficient for being wise. These people are not wise. And the fact that they may be intelligent is no reason, and notice the word I'm using, to believe that they're rational or wise. And so they're falling prey to just a horrible mistake. Well, I'm really good at math and logic and programming. Yeah, you are. That's an instrumental kind of problem solving. But that's not what we need in order to address these problems that are being raised. The mindset that you bring to make these machines is precisely not the mindset that we need to use to decide how we should continue on in this project and how we should make use of these machines. So I think that is a very significant problem. It's part of the deeper problem we have in our culture. We confuse all these things together. We confuse intelligence and rationality. We confuse rationality and being logical. We confuse all of that with being wise. All of these confusions that are popularized by our popular culture are being put on steroids and methamphetamine by these people and generating very dangerous machines.
Yeah, and I think there's back to agency. It puts pressure on, I think, general public in some ways to adopt. Be it using just ChatGPT in the first place, right? Teachers were freaking out, and
Yeah.
employers were, putting down safeguards, and all of that may be good in an educational sense or a literacy sense, but at the same time, I often say to people, like, if you don't like X, don't be on X. What's your problem here? Why do you feel that you have to be there? And I think when tech comes into play, the iPhone has announced their 16 today. And I bought a 14 last year, and it's not going to be able to take advantage of any of the 16, And there's that pressure, well, I don't have the latest phone, so am I behind it? It's like keeping up with the Joneses. And there's that whole side of it, I think, that perhaps not everyone envisioned. And I can recall back in the day when Twitter first started, I was one of the first persons to tweet at the city of Toronto. And it was wonderful. It was real social media. That's completely changed for all kinds of reasons. And I don't think the inventors really suspected that it was going to end up being so algorithm driven and so directed toward people's attitude about something. And now they're piling on that information. And I think we're at the same stage now with AI itself. There's probably, if we're pulling back and taking a look, we might say, yeah, these are some of the harms that could come into play. But unfortunately, as we've said, not enough of the companies are doing that because they've got other motivations. Then we have to maybe introduce government. We're seeing a bit more activity from governments now. I'm quite critical of Canada for being very behind in this, by the way. And I think why? I've had actually someone who worked for the federal government saying to me, well, we're a small country. And I thought, well, what does that got to do with anything, And I just read something, the UN is, the General Assembly, 164 states have voted against the machine, in quotes. And there's another resolution, and it's development kind of a charter of AI, which sounds good to me, but not everybody's behind it. And there's lots of vagueness. And, humans, again, are somewhat reticent, I think, sometimes to go all in on perhaps preventing something. And, back in the Cold War days, right, it was, well, they've got the nukes, we've got the nukes, and it's mutual. So I don't know if we're there with AI yet. I also think of bias when we're talking about these kind of things, right? And different cultures have different ethics. And how are we going to possibly get around any of that to have any kind of reasonable agreement that would say, no killer robots? And, where are we going with that?
So there's 2 points in there. Excellent. First is, I don't know if that's, there's also doing construction outside my studio. I hope that's not coming through. Okay. Um, yeah, I'm really concerned that we can just let game theoretic dynamics take over here, like the Cold War. Well, if we don't do it, the Chinese will. And, and one of the things I worried about when I did my video essays, I said the two industries that are going to jump on this are pornography and the military. And are those the people we want guiding us because they play game theoretic exploitative dynamics to the depth. They play the downward spiral as fast and as quickly as you can play it. So I share your worry about that. And then it overlaps with your second point is like, well, what kind of what kind of ability are we talking about? This ability to take awareness of other biases and other cultures and take on other perspectives and consider different value structures. Well, we're not talking about intelligence. We're talking about something much more moving towards wisdom that has ideas about meaning and rationality and identity formation that go into your considerations. And these machines don't exemplify that, nor do these people that we've been talking about, nor do they seem, is there a good reason to believe they're particularly good exemplars of any of these important traits? So I share both of your worries for those reasons. And I think that I think if we one thing we need to do if these LLMs are going to continue is we need to engage in a massive cross-cultural project of filling the internet with higher and higher caliber of discourse and material, in terms of rationality and wisdom. Because what we're using now is just, the average lowest common denominator that as we feed into these machines, which is, as I say, because intelligence is natural, that's fine so far as we're talking about it here. But when you're talking about rationality and wisdom, which is exactly the issues we're pressing on here, it doesn't capture that because people are not on average good models, and I'm including myself, are not good models of rationality or wisdom. And that's part of what is meant by mentoring. You try and give your kids not the average, you try and give them the best possible models, even the best of yourselves, in the hope that they will aspire to something better.
It's interesting because I'm thinking of back even to driver's ed years ago. We caught our teacher on doing something, and he said, do what I'm teaching, not what I do.
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, you're right. We're definitely not perfect. And I think I embrace that in a way. What worries me again is that we create something that doesn't embrace that and doesn't want to
Yep.
acknowledge it's not perfect. And we also, you mentioned kind of the cult like following perhaps. We believe in its perfection when it's not perfect. So hey, AI said it must be true.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's already my son is as a high school teacher, and that's already happening. Well, I ran this through ChatGPT, and it said this. It's like I don't care, like it's false. I'm sorry, it's still false. Like this is part of the mystique problem. Like people who think intelligence is like a magic wand. Like, well, you try and point out, well, there's oh, we're gonna have robots everywhere. Well, where's all the metal coming from, and where's all the energy? Do you know that to train up one of these machines takes more energy than to run Toronto for 2 weeks? Like, where's all the energy Well, no, the machines will solve these, and people wave their hands. It's like intelligence doesn't override the laws of physics. Like people, like we need to be really much more sanguine about what we're talking about here, and be really like these machines. If we're going to build the robotics, that's another choice point, by the way. Where are all the rare metals coming from? What does that mean in terms of how we're already mining and the kinds of socioeconomic and moral quagmires we're already in our current rare earth mining? Like, are you figuring that into your utopia? You like slow down, think, open up, widen your perspective, look at multiple variables. Stop thinking that a single factor of hype around intelligence is somehow a magic wand that is just going to eradicate everything all at once, all of your problems. Sorry, Keith, I went on about that, but this is a deep problem around this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and I find I identify with teachers right now more than ever. I can recall I was doing some teaching at Centennial College when some of the social media was starting to hit, and I tried to embrace it. I followed students, and I tried to be there with it. I think it's a different game now, though, completely. And
Mm,
we're
mm.
seeing the provincial government here in Ontario is saying now phones have got to be taken away during the day. And I've got mixed feelings about that because I would like to feel we could be intelligent enough to just by ourselves put the phone over there. Um, Now, this goes into maybe some of your understanding of the human mind, though. I know that the brain isn't fully developed until what is it, 25 years old or whatever, and perhaps the maturity
Yeah.
level of some of the students are just not there with that. So we have to act like parents, and that's the way it is. But I think it's already too late in a way. Those that have been on it for a while and have had their phones are very, personal about it. It's my phone. I get so much out of
Mhm.
that phone. So, I wonder again if we're too late, at least with the current generations, perhaps once this is in schools for a long time now in the grade 1, 2, 3, they've grown up now with having their phones taken away. It won't be the same issue. But I wonder how much resistance we're going to get. And almost like again, if you talk about it in a bad way, this is bad for you, this is bad for you, does it not draw attention to that?
Oh
And
yeah.
want to
Yeah.
see it then?
Yeah, and I mean that goes back to the point I just made. Like you have to be careful. This is a very good point, Keith, because if you just try this is why I don't think many of the alignment problem solutions will address the problem because they're just prohibition solutions. Prohibition solutions they often just enhance the mystique of the prohibited thing. Look at what prohibition and alcohol did, right? It does it like so you bang on. You're bang on this. Simply adopting a prohibition thing is not going to be the correct strategy either. I like I said, I think disciplines that we used to put in the very back or even try to exclude from the education of our children are going to need to be much more central. Philosophy is going to have to be a much bigger part because we have to teach people much earlier on how to step back and look at really messy problems that don't have easy solutions, that require you to cultivate wisdom and virtue in order to properly learn through time and maturation how to properly and responsibly address them. We're going to have to get to that. So I'm pushing a problem maybe their point maybe in a direction you don't want to go, but this is going to require a significant rethinking of our education. We're going to need to go back and notice how difficult this is even in the topic, and not make the market the sole thing that is the focus of our educational endeavors. We now face a cultural problem, and we need cultural disciplines rather than teaching job skills and market skills. And don't tell me about, well, my kid needs to get a job. Your kid needs a future more than they need a job now. And so you need to get them educated in a way that is going to make them viable for this future in a powerful way. Sorry, I'm getting too excited about this, Keith. I
I
should.
love it. I love the passion. I love the enthusiasm, and that's meaning right there. You're selling it well. um, and I also think it's not always the students. It's so easy for us to say, "Oh yeah, it's the kid."
Yeah.
The adults have this problem too. I mean, I know
Yes.
a couple who the wife had to text the husband, "Hello, I'm right here." I mean, I'm sure you've heard these stories before,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So it really is an all encompassing thing for not just the kids. It's the adults. It's the older adults as well. And I'm not sure, again, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? I want to reach out to these people and say, we really need to think about this. Have you thought about it? What is your opinions on that? And again, back to agency, right? Give them some meaning behind um, the fact that they need to be in it and thinking about it. Employees should be talking to their bosses about it. What do you mean? You're going to bring this in. Let's think about this. What does that mean? And it's not always about losing a job, right? It's all kinds of
Yeah.
different things
That's right.
behind it, right? It leads me to talk a bit about the what I call, you have to push the button syndrome. You see the sign that says, "Don't push this button."
Yeah.
Most people want to push the button, and I think a lot of us are aware. Yeah, we could head into dangerous territory here, but what is it that's making us want to push that button? We're going to do it, And even if the government laid down the law and said you can't, there's going to be, back in the garage kind of thing. It used to be you could make all these wonderful things.
Well, I want to add to that. It's not going to be just in the garage because you see, there's another problem with the prohibition strategies, or we'll just drop a universal charter. Look, Jeff Hinton, a colleague of mine, formerly from U of T, myself, other people, we aren't in this. We weren't doing any of this because we're trying to make machines and make $1 million. We're doing this because we're trying to figure out how the human mind works. And what are you going to do? Are you going to shut down that project? Are you going to say, well, nobody anywhere can now try to figure out the nature of intelligence or rationality or wisdom or how the human mind works? Really? You're not going to be able to shut that project down. That's impossible to shut that. You're shutting down education, basically. So this is what I mean. People think, well, we can just isolate this problem and put a legal fence around it, and then everything will just be okay. It was like, no, like I said, people like me, where I don't want any dystopias, but I wasn't doing this. You see, in fact, Keith, when I was doing this, I was telling my students, look, I'm going to try and educate you about this because I want to teach you about intelligence, rationality, and wisdom. So maybe once, right, as we also develop the science, we can get the two so deeply linked together that we won't hack our way into AI. We'll wisely walk our way into it. And I said, my greatest fear is that some corporate bad player will just hack their way into these machines. And unfortunately, my fears came true rather than my hopes, which is unfortunate. But um, the point I'm making is like, part of it is we just have that impish need to, wow, what happens if I eat the apple, right? But part of it is, well, the people who actually laid down all of the science for this were not doing it for the economics. They were doing it for the science. They were trying to get real knowledge about the mind, which is one of the most important things I think science can do. That's why I'm a cognitive scientist. I scientifically study cognition because the benefits that are possible, just even the truth, but also the benefits possible from that science are in, are just like incalculable. And so you're not, that's what I mean. You can't isolate it. You can't shut it down. Well, we won't let anybody. Yeah, you're right. People might be still hacking away in the garages. I'm not too worried about them. I'm worried about, yeah, but there's going to be people in the universities are still going to be, they're still doing this stuff, by the way. I know they are, right? They're doing stuff way ahead of what's going on in OpenAI and stuff like that. Oh, everything that OpenAI did was basically taken from scientific research that had been done, properly in the university. And none of that is going to stop. And we're not going to be able to legislate that to stop because where are you going to draw the fence around science? Like, what does that even mean to you? Sorry, I'm going on about this, but people often don't get what I say when I say, like, fencing it off, trying to prohibit it isn't going to work. That's again why we're trying to get across with this idea of mentoring the machines, like the trying to solve alignment with prohibition. It's not going to work because you're not going to stop the scientists. And because we don't, yeah, some of them have evil motives. Some of them are bad players. Some of them are motivated by the imp of the perverse. But a lot of them are motivated by, but how does the human mind work? And that is a perennial question. You're not going to get people to stop asking that question.
It's a great segue to another thing I wanted to talk about today. Just a couple of things to what you were talking about. I noticed your book cover is 2001-ish. And I think of 2010, the sequel, and
Yeah, 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 yeah,
all these universes are yours. Just don't go there on that one planet, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's reminiscent of what we're talking about. But speaking of the mind, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you as well, I had cause to talk to a neurologist recently. I was talking to him about this thing that I'm proposing, which is we go AI in reverse. We bring it towards humanity and stop the idea of a singularity and so on. I'll
Yeah.
come back to this in a second. But he said, yeah, I don't really know anybody that's going in that direction. He's a British guy. And he said, but back at UK in the day when I was studying, some professor I remember put, all these electrodes and they were able to communicate with a computer. And this was like 1950 something. So we've always been going in that direction, sort of into the machine.
Mhm.
I wonder what you're thinking about our mind's capacity to go the opposite way. So the machine into us. Examples already, without any machines at all, we've got people like Einstein and Mozart, truly brilliant. people and those like savants. You can throw the matches out and they know how many are on the table. There's obviously individuals evidence, if you will, of the brain having amazing capacities. Now, the question here is, well, could we not somehow leverage what we've learned about AI and bring, humans up to a certain brilliant level, whether it be wearables or implants or something to that effect? What is your take on our capacity, our brain's capacity to become, in a sense, our own kind of not artificial intelligence, but hyper intelligence, if you will? So going
Well,
through this way
so,
with
so
the
there was
technology.
somebody who talked about that. It was John Vervaeke, and he did it in a TEDx talk way back when. It was called neuro-enlightenment. And I actually said, look, we have the potential, the ability for cyber interventions, cyber technologies, our enhanced psychotechnologies, our knowledge of the mind can also allow us to enhance it. And, and now we've got, things like the psychedelic renaissance happening. We have the capacity, we could coordinate those to make us wiser and more rational, which would then bootstrap our ability to study and use those, which then could feed, and we could get actually a virtuous circle. And I mean, I was being a little bit pretentious, and I called it the possibility of neuro-enlightenment, right? And I think that's Keith, I'm glad you brought it up, because that's an example of of 2 points. One is we are going to cyborg. That's before we get robots doing the iRobot thing. We're going to cyborg. Neuralink, for all of its flawed science, is still lurching forward, like something lurching forward towards Bethlehem to be born, right? And so we've got this, right? Look, Andy Clark, we're natural born cyborgs. Other than the atmosphere and your naked body, everything around you is a tool, including your clothes, right? Everything. We cyborg. Our brains, you can show that our brains will extend our body image and our sense of identity into tools that we are regularly and reliably using, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to cyborg. Now, we could, as you said, we could either cyborg ourselves and drain ourselves into the machines, or you could do, and I think what I was saying was convergent with what you're saying. We could say, no, let's pursue neuro-enlightenment. Now, here's the thing: we could be doing that and using that to better model how should we be creating these machines, these LLMs, putting better data sets onto the internet, and so that they also, do you see, we could fold them into this overall project where they get better and better, and we get better and better at the joint project of human neuro-enlightenment. And there's a couple possibilities here. Maybe they accelerate and they get enlightened faster than we do. Well, great, they'll help us. And maybe they can never get enlightened, and we find out that we're the only beings that can. That's great. That's an important, really important, spiritually important discovery. So yes, again, I'm being very enthusiastic. I'm amplifying your point, but I've been arguing for this as an alternative, right? Instead of draining ourselves into the machines, we could pursue neuro-enlightenment. We could couple that project to the way we model ourselves for these machines, the kind of data we give these machines, how we mentor these machines.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like your virtuous circle there as a concept. A neuro enlightenment too. These are terms that, if it's okay with you, I'm going to start using.
Please.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the people that I've spoken to about this are somewhat fearful. Like, I don't want an implant. Are you kidding? And yet, we replace hips, right? I mean, it's not as if we haven't had artificial things being put inside us, and the race with vaccines with mRNA and even DNA experiments, and back to the CRISPR babies and so on. We've dabbled in some of this kind of stuff in terms of interfering with our own
Yeah.
basically existence as it is, as we know it. And I wonder about that in terms of, again, our psychology behind it. There's going to be a lot of people who, I don't want to go there. And then there's what I want to mention is the gamification side of things, virtual realities that are, you mentioned
Yeah.
pornography, for example. I mean, I could see that taking place with such realistic environments that we've
Yeah.
got the headset on and we never want to leave. And, this whole idea of our need perhaps to get away from the realities that we face and go into something else, and leveraging then where AI is going with the ability to generate and make it look extremely real. Risks, goodness, badness. I mean, from health, it might be a good way to help people, I suppose, if you're presenting an environment that they're not used to, that's a healthy environment. I have mixed feelings about the advantages and the disadvantages. And I've also heard that just, wearing these kind of headsets can also be detrimental to vision and
Oh, yeah.
brain. And so, well, yeah, where are you at with some of that kind of side of things?
Well, you said two or three different points there. They were woven well together. The first one about, well, I don't want to intervene. Sorry, I bet you cook your food, and we are the only creatures that do that. And you don't give that second thought. And because you cook your food, the jaw muscles around your skull didn't have to be so large. And because you cooked your food, you freed up metabolic energy, which meant the human brain could actually expand, which means you got better at getting fire and making fire and cooking your food and so on. And we have been doing this since we've been us. So the idea that, oh, I don't want to intervene with technology, we've been doing it since fire and hunting tools, and that has significantly altered our evolution. We wouldn't have the brains we have if we didn't start cooking our food, right? So, like, just I like, again, the idea that you can somehow rope this off, and I'll put a little fence around it and put some laws around it. No, that's not going to work. So we either let the corp this is the theme of the book, you read the blur, we either let the corporations and the governments run this, or we try to make this a cultural collective decision that we in which we can play, as the word you're using, which is the right word, in which we can have agency. So that the virtual exodus is already happening, and this is part of a big other chunk of my work. And I know we're not going to talk about that, but I talk about the meaning crisis, and one of the ways in which people are hungry for getting meaning and try to get it satisfied is they go into the virtual world, because they can find a lot of the things that give us a sense of meaning in life. Think of a video game, your example of a video game, right? It has a very clear narrative structure to it. There's a lot of rules and it makes sense. It's highly intelligible, and I can self-transcend and in that world. So I've got all of these things that religion used to do. It used to give me an overarching, right, set of rules. I get an overarching narrative, and I have a way to transcend and ascend. And then I could either be in that world, within which also, by the way, I can get into the flow state, which is kind of an optimal state to be in, or I can go back to this world here. Well, guess what? More and more people want to be in the virtual world. And your point is exactly right. Will AI exacerbate that problem? You bet. It's going to exacerbate it terrifically. But my point is, we're already facing the virtual exodus problem because we're already in the meaning crisis, and the virtual realities are already good enough to be dragging people in a way that is destructive. This is why the WHO has actually said there is a thing called video game addiction, because what happens is you're in this flowing, meaningful state within the game, and then you can't find that in the real world, so that you get depressed in the real world, and now you get a vicious cycle. So now you go back to the game to get alleviation from that viciousness. You get more locked in. Now you come back to the real. It's even more depressing and dark and gray and complex. And the whole thing spirals, and you get trapped and you get addicted, just like you get addicted to gambling or to heroin. And so this is what I mean. The religious, and I'm using that word deliberately, the religious potential of these machines to addict people is profound, and it's going to, even before we have full-blown AGI, artificial general intelligence, the machines, even ramping up the current virtual reality we have with our cutting edge technologies, is already exacerbating that problem several orders of magnitude, way before we have, the Terminator style robots. We're already in that problem.
Yeah, and I wonder, again, the mitigations, and even the word mitigation, what does that mean, right? Relative to parenting or teaching. Um, yeah, I used to feel, I still do to some extent, you've got to join them. You got to be there. You got to show up in the game somehow. Hey, wait a minute. Did you think about that? Now, a fellow by the name of Louis Rosenberg that I found on LinkedIn did actually a video on the capacity already of generative AI in terms of knowing you. and it's kind of like going to be the best snake oil salesman around
Yep, exactly.
because all the data we're releasing, it can come in and say, hey, Keith, you need another pair of Blundstones. I already have 12. Yeah, you could use another one. You could donate some of those. I mean, it's just going to know you and be able to sell you and turn and pivot based on maybe knowing, oh, yeah, reluctance there. Okay, I'm going to go this way. And that's not so much a game, but I mean, I'm thinking in terms of shopping malls. And if you've got an app and
Yep.
you're going into the shopping, we're going to get the ads, that recognize us. And, all of this is yet another level of AI that I'm not sure people are even thinking about. It's already happening in some places where the grocery stores are using this kind of thing where it recognizes you and don't forget the milk kind of thing.
Yep.
And to me, these are all layers of the issue. And one of the problems I sense with just even talking AI is it's so general a term that we could focus on any one of these aspects and the dangers and the need to teach about it and so on. Yet people's perception is it's this holistic thing. Oh, that's AI, and there's the minimal AI like a chatbot
Yep.
or something, versus the really what we're talking about here from Louis Rosenberg's idea of the super smart sales technique that's going to get you whether you know it or not. And I mean, what is your thoughts on communicating this then, the layers, the nuances? How do you deal with that when you're prepping something? I mean, you could be very topic specific, I suppose, but if your audience is a mixed bag, this is one of the issues I face, right? How deep in the weeds do I go versus
Yeah. So I try a sort of a multi-layered strategy. So that's one layer. I go in and do what we're doing here, and I think it should be done. By the way, get into the AI and like really wrestle with that. But I don't think I set that in the larger context. Is yeah, but well, let's just do what I just did. Oh, well, we're worried about AI and we're worried about dragging people in. Well, that's because your culture is suffering a meaning crisis. This is why people are taking up these weird relationships with these things already. That if they were doing it anywhere else, we would call it religious, and that's not a coincidence. So, like, what are we doing to address the meaning crisis? What are we doing to give people places? Like, for example, giving people places. I ask my students, where do you go for information? And like the cyborgs they are, they hold up their phones. I say, well, where do you go for knowledge? And they'll be, well, I don't know, science, university. They got sort of an answer, but they're a little bit hesitant. And then I go, where do you go to cultivate wisdom? And there's an anxious silence. Now, there's other cultures that would have an answer, but ours doesn't. And that's what I mean. So you can't, and that's not optional. People have to have ways of dealing with self-deception, of enhancing their connectedness to themselves, to each other, to reality, of maturing themselves. Right? They need all of this, and what we've basically done is decide, well, the state education, parenting, and public education, public entertainment, that'll do it. That's ridiculous. That's not going to do it. And so a lot of my other work is how do we provide people with the healthy alternatives that will make the noxious versions of the snake oil AI or the guru AI less attractive to people by tapping into, instead of giving them the addictive candy that hijacks, what if we can give them something nutritious that actually nourishes them? And so I also do that as right. So zero in like we're doing on the AI, really come in nuts and bolts, hard science, but also pull back on this bigger issue, which is okay, but you better address the meaning crisis. You better help. You better be doing something about where addressing it. We're giving people healthy places and communities where they can cultivate connectedness and wisdom.
it's interesting you talk about pulling back too. I attended a presentation that was really quite effective. A fellow was from France, a nice French accent, and he was talking about that as a manager director, he would pull back. He'd say, I go on my balcony and I look down at the team. And he said he kept doing that. And I think too many of us don't. We get absorbed. We're in it.
Yeah.
And we're so in it, we can't pull back and kind of perceive, well, you know what? Maybe I am addicted here. Or maybe
Yeah.
my initial thought of this as having the value I thought it did, maybe not, right? And to me, again, it goes to the root of our humanity. And some of us may be more wise in that sense to recognize
Yeah.
perhaps that's good. But I think part of our problem as humans is we're such a mixed bag that we can't guarantee it and we can't even teach it sometimes, right? Because there is like you mentioned, addiction. Sometimes that's father to son, it's inherent. And even to recognize it, they always say you got to hit bottom before you acknowledge it. And
I think that's right. And I do not want to in any way convey that there aren't important, individual differences, to use the psychology term. But there's also, like, think about this. I think there's a very strong correlation between people's addiction to social media and the fact that, uh, and starting before social media, by the way, so social media isn't the cause, although it may be a looped phenomena that it's exacerbating, right? But decade by decade, the number of close friends that people have is reliably going down. Now of that's a driver of people into social media and into fake communities of fake closeness, these religious communities around the AIs and stuff like that. And that's what I mean. Why is that happening? And if we really want to address this problem that we're talking about, you have to pull back, exactly like you're saying. Yes, we can't get everybody to pull back. I agree, Keith. We've been trying since Plato. That's not going to work, right? But for those who can pull back and get more people to do it, when we pull back, there's problems that are revealed by pulling back that we can address that could help even the people that can't pull back. Which is, well, what could we do? Why is that happening? Why is it that why is it that social media didn't deliver on the promise? It makes us more connected, but none of us feel like we have more connection, to ourselves, to other people, to the world. Um, we're not close. So what happened there? Why did it fail? What went wrong? What was going wrong before social media? Like, these are all, and people are investigating this, but we could prioritize that kind of investigation.
I agree. I also think a term that I heard, it goes back a long ways, actually, a fellow by the name of Tony Schwartz. He's an advertiser. He's long past. He was the one who did the Daisy commercial, if you know the Lyndon Johnson election, and the girl is,
Oh, yes, 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 yeah,
and they only aired once and had tremendous reaction, so on. But he came up with the term partipulation. And I've been using that in my teaching about it. Is if we agree to participate in our own manipulation, that's one thing, because you're coming at it from an organized educational view. So yeah,
yeah,
getting my data, but I'm getting something out of it. I'm agreeing. It's too many of us though aren't even thinking about that. We're sucked in and we're participating. We have no conception that we're
yeah,
participating in this big thing. And I do think that's one of the obstacles we're faced again. It's like we're kind of in it now, and back to the early days of it, there wasn't really an awareness, perhaps, that it would be so all absorbing. I also like what you said, though, in terms of it's not so much new. Even back to the early days of TV, right? Maybe
yeah,
your parents did the same thing. You're watching too much TV.
yes, yeah. So that's right. We have to pay attention to the fact so let me try again. I want to start over and reframe this. We can't blame everything going wrong on the advent of AI, especially the possible advent of AGI. We can do what we're doing here, which is very carefully talk about the problem, really try to get clear on it and pull it apart. But we have to also see that it is part of of an ongoing history and set of problems and factors that precede this, in very important and powerful ways. So another discipline that needs to become very important again, and again oriented a little bit more towards these kinds of issues, is history, cultural history. Like, why do we think the way we do? Um, and the problem with that, right away, and I'll admit it, and because, oh, we are doing that in the school. Well, maybe, maybe not. Because the problem with that is you automatically get the temptation to indoctrination, which is part of the problem, right? So how do you get people aware of the cultural cognitive history of why we think the way that we do? Why do so many ways of thinking or seem natural to us? Why are we inevitably drawn into things the way we are? We need to do that without thereby falling into indoctrination. Well, this is the way we should be thinking now. And whereas that is just sort of mandated. That has to be it's very much an organic thing that arises from massive discussion and dialogue and reflection and argument and debate.
Yeah, it's quite true. And I think of the term critical thinking. I don't like the word critical too much because critical implies, it's negative, right?
Yeah.
The same idea. Yeah, we should be able to look at what we're being told and as students, offer some counter to that.
Yep.
And often people will say, you're being naive, or when you grow up, you'll know better. But I find it refreshing, I think, of a viewpoint that's new and hasn't been exposed perhaps to some of the bias, as you say, the viewpoint that maybe this is it. Put it on the essay and you'll get good marks, right?
Yeah.
I think we need to have a nice mixture. And this goes back to, I think, where the companies need to start involving more of what I'd call the common folk in their discussions. Hire someone for a while, 6 months or whatever. Don't do a focus group. Hire them and have them at the around the table saying, this is what we're planning, and get some input. That to me is, I don't know if that's too revolutionary for some people or not, but it seems to me we need those viewpoints. Otherwise, it won't work. Even with our own agency, if it's already done, delivered, and released, and people are getting it, it comes back to that idea of, well, I have to have it now, rather than maybe getting in at an earlier stage and saying, well, why are you doing that? I'd rather have this than that. Put your efforts into that. Again, I wonder how much of that is our own reluctance, because a lot of people that aren't, let's say, scientists or app developers or whatever, just feel, well, I don't have a say in this. Yet they're going to be a
Yeah.
consumer user of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, one way of saying perhaps what you're saying is we need to give them a say other than their purchasing power, which is the only say that they're given right now. Well, they don't have to buy the product. Well, like try and not have a telephone, right? I mean, like, what does that mean now? Let alone I don't even mean a cell phone. I grew up like it was weird, and this is like way like in the 60s. It was weird if you didn't have a telephone, you were out of touch, right? Like you fell through all kinds of social cultural cracks. And now the cell phones are like, oh well, just don't get a cell phone. Well, again, that prohibition strategy, that's too simplistic, that's too naive. What we need to do is ask people, like, what kind of relationship do you have to your phone? Here's what some of the scientific research says. Some of it says that many of you, especially the ones that have been brought on from their mother's knee, have an identity relationship with their cell phone. They experience existential anxiety if their phone is lost. They feel like there's something wrong with them, the way like people used to feel when they were unsure about their future or something like that. What is that like I would like to know from people, is is that the case? Did you see that in your kids? What are you doing when that like how are you trying to deal with that in your kid? Because that's a real problem, right? Like and I I, I just I just wonder. Sorry, I'm beset by an irony right now. These LLMs work by basically taking the common denominator from everything we're doing, and then they're kind of like the common law, automated common law. They just take everything and they compress it down, and it's sort of what the common of what. But what another thing we could do is actually get, as you said, the common folk, and I don't mean anything derogatory by it, it's your term, and ask them how are like, instead of just taking their data, let's talk to them and ask them, well, how is this impacting you? How are you dealing with this? What happens when your kids, you have to take the phone away from your kids? What is that like for you? What does that mean to you? How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the fact that your kid can be bullied in a way that they couldn't be bullied before? And do you want just more legislation? Do you want to do that? Or is that not working? Because it's probably not working, by the way. Um, yeah, I'm sorry. That was a long way of saying I really agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think even this idea of have and have nots, or as I use the term common folks, or just folks who aren't in the making of it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The absence of input directly in the manufacture of this. Those are the people I think that need to have more of a say. Um, but yeah, I do feel that these are all the multi layers that we face, and I would like to see more of the AI folks who are making it be more cognizant, I think, of this. And anytime I'll attend something that's by and large made up of those, it's very, it's like everything else, right? It's jargon that they understand.
Yeah.
It's the dreams and scope and all of that, rather than them stepping back. And often on the panels, you won't see representation of an opposite view. And opposite view isn't even the right word. Let's say a more thorough view,
Alternative.
if you like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The thing is, maybe just to not lose a thread here, and I don't want to lose the point you just made either. The common folk, again, I'm not totally happy with that term, but they actually do have a say in this. It's literally what they're saying and what they're recording and what they're putting out on the internet, right? That is driving the content for these machines. So you actually literally do have a say, right? And we could, I mean, we could all just decide that we would use the internet differently. We could change the culture of it, and we could change how these machines there behave in a way that is totally due to us and has nothing to do with corporate structures and engineering and motherboards. It's like, well, if we change the data sets, we change what these machines are capable of. And that is our property. That is a project we can undertake if we choose to do so. So yes, I know what you mean. I'm not trying to be dismissive. People feel like, well, I have no say in the make of the machine. But you literally do have a say in the make of these kinds of machines, which is really unique about them. This is how it's different than an automobile. The automobile isn't running off of your behavior other than some measures of what you want. But these machines are literally feeding off of what people are saying and doing and the choices that they're making and what they're paying attention to and how they're speaking and how they're speaking and how they're writing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Have you heard of a fellow by the name of Mo Gaudet, ex of
No.
Google? Um, he left Google quite some time ago, and he's talking about this kind of thing. Where what are we teaching the machine?
Yes.
And if you look around and you see what's being put out, the machines are learning from that, right? And maybe we need to re-emphasize the other side of it, like which is similar. I think what you're saying, mentoring, right?
Yeah.
Let's picture the good side. So there's value in articulating things the way you've done right there, because I think even I talk about getting back out and watching, right? I mean, I'll look at this later and I'll go, yeah, perhaps I'm going too far in that direction around saying we don't have any agency here, and when actually what you just said actually makes a lot of sense. And I have mentioned this to people before. If you don't like what Facebook is doing, and you say, well, it's the only place I can go and talk to my friends. Well, that's not true. You could develop your own website and
Yeah.
give them the address, and you can have a comment stream, and off you go, and you don't have to worry about all the rest of it, right? But a lot of times people just don't think that. Um, Another thing I wanted to mention too is this idea too. You won't have to really know code. I mean, it's like back in the day when I started doing web development and stuff. Learn HTML and all that stuff. Now you don't need to know any of that
No.
coding. You
No. Yeah.
get a tool, and it's going to be this. Well, already is, right? ChatGPT can create and render all kinds of things for you. And we may reach a point where, in fact, we will be able to build our own, as we see it, a need for something that's using AI that is beneficial to the family or to the house or to the school. And we can enlarge from there. It won't necessarily be the super duper folks that are brilliant now, like Elon Musk, may be replaced by, a whole bunch of people that are able to utilize the tools to make things. And the question there would be, well, what do they make?
Well, first of all, your point's well taken. I mean, I used to use the example of Poppet calculator, but I could use an even better example now. Your calculator app on your phone, which is this little tiny app, has more computational power in it than NASA had available for it during the Apollo missions. And so you don't need all those brilliant people and all those machines, right? You just beep, beep, it's ready to go. So I absolutely agree with what you just said. That's coming, and more we're going to the line between talking to these machines and creating these machines is going to blur, because that's already how they're coming into existence. So I just want to put a red pencil line under what you just said. I think that's exactly right. But that goes back to our deeper point. There is the high probability that two things are going to happen And how they're going to pull on each other, I would not hesitate to guess because I can't comprehend the complexity of it. One way is we're moving to sort of techno feudalism where we're going to have these super giants, and that's definitely within months. Some of the people I'm talking to in the know, we're moving. Some of these projects and these corporations and these people are it's not just money, it's influence. If you sort of put money and influence together, they can rival many nation states already. And that means we're moving towards, and who under whose authority are they? Well, nobody's really. So that's one possibility. But the other one is the other one you just said, which is this kind of decentralization, sort of the Star Trek version of the future, where it decentralizes, and that's not as prominent right now, but that can pick up steam. And then of course there's the worry that the techno lords, I don't know what to call them, will try to pervert that bottom up process to their advantage. And I don't know how that. I'm sorry, I'm sounding like I'm starting to write a science fiction novel here, but I think both of those are unfolding. And I think what addresses both of them in an integrated fashion is, well, let's do the bottom up thing. Well, we got to get people better educated culturally, like we've been talking about, for rationality and reasonableness and virtue and wisdom. So this bottom up decentralized creation is not driven by the demons of our psyche, but by the better angels of our nature, as Lincoln might say. And we need enough of that education also to be able to recognize when the techno lords are engaging in something that is politically or ethically or even scientifically noxious. And so, yeah, I don't know which one of those is going to. Right now, the techno lords are way ahead, and like I say, like we're going to. I can't give name. Talk to people on the insides, right? And some of the people saying, and they're talking to the movers and shakers. It's like 6 months to a year where techno feudalism becomes more apparent to the culture at large. So I think it's going to be on our radar first. But I do think the thing you said is not that far behind, and how they're going to play out against each other. And here's what we shouldn't do, because how they're going to play out against each other, I don't know. And neither do you, and no, neither does anybody. So just letting that happen out of ignorance is a bad idea. We got to get everybody involved thinking about it now, educating for it, and we have to undergo the transformations into the kind of beings, maybe neuro-enlightenment, that is needed to really be capable of addressing that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a final thought, because I'm mindful of our time here. I've met a lot of people in, let's say, my age bracket who are talking about, off the grid. I'm off the grid. Yet they do have a cell phone.
Yeah.
And, and they're also, we're encouraged through even paying our income tax through the internet, right? And buying
Yep.
concert tickets. And there's just so much that's pushing us this way. And I think there's a lot of talk, and some countries have done this already, where everything is deposited. It's like a one-stop ID for yourself. So it's got your
Yeah.
library card and your OHIP and all that stuff. As we move to those directions where government is, let's say, more highly at play utilizing the technologies, and what does that mean relative to us as citizens, right? And there's the idea that not all of us vote, right? The voting tends to be not that many population that votes, and all of those things come into play that aren't AI, but
No.
will influence the outcomes of AI. And one of the things I try to say to folks as well, there's election happening usually at some point, a year from now, whatever. When they knock on the door, you say, well, what are your thoughts on this kind of stuff? And it's surprising how many of the politicians go, I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a very, very well placed point. Let me pick up on that one, because let me give you an example. And so AI and deep fake and stuff like that, we're very close. And possibly also useful quantum computation. That's a lot more controversial. But let's put that aside. But AI enhanced deep fake, very close, very close. We've already got cases of where people get telephone calls that their children have been kidnapped and they send money and it wasn't their kid at all and stuff like that. That's already happened. That's not science fiction. This is going to grow exponentially. And then what are we going to do? How are we going to authenticate things? Um, how are we going to make sure that it was really Keith McDonald that I just saw? How are we going to, right? And who's going to step in? And you know who's going to want to step in and become the authenticator of all things? It's going to be the government. And do you want the government having that kind of intrusive moment by moment monitoring of your life? And you say, well, no, I don't, which is, I think, the right answer. But then it's incumbent on us to come up with a viable alternative. And by the way, I've put this problem into other people's. There's people working on this in good faith with good talent, people that I know closely. But we like that's an example again. Don't just do, oh, AI. It's like, okay, you don't want the government being the authenticator of of authenticity for videos and and telephone call. So who do you want the corporations to? Oh no, I don't want that. So what? Come on, think about it. We have to. If we don't come up with this, that vacuum is not going to stay there for very. It's going to get filled by something because that's a very powerful need. Society will break down if we don't solve that problem. So if we don't want government and corporations there, we have to come up with an alternative right now. We have to start talking about it and thinking about it, reflecting on it. And to my mind, this goes, and I think this is maybe your point. This is the expanded sense of what AI literacy means. It doesn't just mean how do we put boxes around the chat GPT and how do we use them in the schools. It's like, how are we going to solve the authentication or the deep fake problem with, right? How are we going to do that? Because if we don't want, right, oh, we'll just prevent people from doing that. Oh, right. So now what you're basically saying is the only people that will get to do it are the governments and the corporations. So that's not a solution. So again, this is what I mean. Sorry, I'm rambling, but the point I'm making is this is already here. It's already now, a lot of this.
I can give you a quick anecdote. This is years ago, again, working on the web team, hire a web architect, and she was great, I thought. And she said, well, why don't we start utilizing the tools that are available right now? For example, people are paying their taxes and we know what age they are and we know if they have dogs because they've got a dog license. So could we not push out content, um, related to what they're interested in? And virtually everybody we talk to, are you kidding me? Why? That's just, yet they got that all the time already back then on the internet,
Yeah,
right? They're
yeah,
looking at
yeah,
this, and because of trackers,
yeah.
they're getting that kind of thing. And I think government has come a long way in terms of their idea about that, where they're more in favor now of that kind of using the data to
Yep, exactly.
push or house the information. Interesting how, let's say, 15 years or so, moves thinking. And government traditionally, we always say, oh, they're really slow. Now that they're kind of in the game, I think they're less slow. And we really need to look at that as an avenue, not necessarily of saving us, although it can help, but also perhaps being, guilty of
Yeah.
what's going on, right?
I was worried that that this presidential election was going to be really like set askew by deep fake video. There's been a few, but they're still not quite good enough, and you can still figure it out. But the next election cycle, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a big problem.
Yeah, as it gets better, and let's say if our knowledge doesn't keep up in terms of how to
Exactly,
identify,
exactly. That's exactly the right thing to say, Keith. That's exactly that. That's exactly it.
and even I think utilizing AI to help us discover bogus AI or bogus fakes, fakes are bogus, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, indeed, indeed. John, I think we probably should wrap it up. Just I appreciate you giving me all the time that you've given, and I would like to continue this at some point as you go further, and I pick up some things. Hopefully, we could keep a dialogue going every so often
Sure,
and
sure. Yeah, yeah.
continue the discussion. Genuinely appreciate it, and yeah, amazing thoughts and amazing work that you're doing. So as I would say, I think I noticed my camera. Is it going to give me the thumbs up? It automatically generated a thumbs up kind of thing. Yeah, well, I don't know if you see it. Anyway, it's not doing it. Okay. So much for that and that AI. But awesome again. Any parting words for the masses who may have listened to us, just as a wrap?
Maybe just a request for people. I mean, I'd be very happy if people are like take up an interest in my work around AI. We've got two of the four books are coming out. It's coming out in a serial fashion. So books one and two are out. Books three and four are still coming. But I mean, like I said, there's these bigger issues, and I've got a book coming out with Christopher Mastipietro and Madeline Abraham on awakening from the meaning crisis, based on my YouTube series about some of these bigger problems we've been talking about, and maybe take a step back. Not just my work, but maybe I mean, I'll also selfishly promote my own stuff. But right, it's a way of taking a step back and look at the bigger picture about this much more cultural, complex milieu that we're wrestling with. So maybe take a look at that too.
Definitely, and I'll provide some links as well on the video. We'll let you know when that's ready to go as well. And yeah, it's like the idea of, usually it's a negative, right? One step forward, two steps back. But maybe we got to do that. Take those two steps back. Just
Yeah.
Awesome, sir. Much appreciated. And yeah, let's keep in touch, and we'll talk again and carry on, as they would say.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. And now, just some publicity for myself here. This is where you can reach me. If I get a like, if you like what you're hearing, like us, follow, subscribe. There's some places you can find me. LinkedIn.com/company. Literacy AI is the company page. /in/McDonald is the LinkedIn page. And Literacy AI TV is the YouTube channel. If that went too fast, you can go to the website, literacyai.com. and find out all you need there. Thanks for watching, folks.